Hello and welcome to another D&D Stories. I am your host, TheWriter, and this is the show where I sit here and regale you with all the tabletop gaming stories and remember when something cool happens. So today, we begin a new campaign called The Rods of Calamity. Another go collect the things quest, but it is oftentimes not the story, but the players that throw the monkey wrench in and make the story really, really interesting, or in our case, really, really funny. So, we had just, in real life, we had just finished out Of the Mountain. You know, we kind of had the Game of Thrones ending where, everything has gone wrong, but that's realistically what would have happened. But, I handed the mantle of DM off of, I've been DMing for months, somebody else do it, I want to actually play the game. And it goes to my buddy Ben. And it's not fast Ben or strong Ben. I know 4 Bens and 2 or 3 Andrews for some reason amongst my pool of D&D people. But we handed off to him, and he's got this campaign ready. In fact, he's run this campaign a number of times with all different groups of people, slowly refining it and changing the details and making it better. And I was like, wow, I've never heard of a DM running the same campaign over and over again. Surely by now, sheer number of times he's refined it into a piece of art. That sounds great. And he goes, okay, 5th edition. And I'm like, shit. Because you guys know I hate 5th edition. Magic items are not priced. There's not enough choices. There's not enough, you can't pick where my skill points go, etc., etc. That's a video for another day. Not fond of 5th edition, but, hey Tony, do you want to play D&D or not? It's you could play 0 D&D or you could play 5th edition D&D. I was like, fine, I'll play 5th edition. So he drops us off at level 5, you get 1,000 gold pieces and a free magic item. We do the point system, etc., etc. Of course, I gotta roll a bard, because that's what I am. I'm a bard, I'm a storyteller. Not so much a singer in real life, but I roll out Caleb Knifey Sudemeyer, and he's a human bard, 5th level. His magic item is it was a weird word, Periot or Perioft. It's a medallion. It's a necklace. The Medallion of Health, which would, I think, heal me a little more when I sleep at night, and if Caleb were to fall in battle and to start rolling on death saves or whatever 5th edition has, where you have 3 saves and if you fail them you die, the Amulet of Health would automatically stabilize you. So if Caleb were to fall in battle, as long as he doesn't get chopped in half or something, the medallion will stabilize his life so I don't have to make those saves. Not bad for a necklace, I gotta tell you. And it's only an uncommon magic item, so yeah, because 5th edition lays out their magic items according to rarity instead of, pricing them so the DM has one less thing to worry about. But that's my own opinion on 5th edition. So we have Caleb Knifey Sudemeyer. We've got Davhand, the human ranger, Gyak, the half-orc monk, and Valfar, the half-orc paladin, who is of the, the nature god sort of persuasion. So he could have very easily been a druid, but he was a very of-the-earth kind of guy. And he kind of explains the setting to us. 1 gold piece is the equivalent of $50 or 39 pounds if you're of the English persuasion. We start in the Republic of Avaros, which is fresh off the heels of a war the past couple of 100 years, and we're in the capital, the seaside capital of Dawnhaven, a great trading city sort of place. And we are hired by a child, a girl who's 14 years old. She's the heir of this great empire of wealth and prosperity, but until she comes of age, she actually doesn't have access to any of her money or anything. She has a vault under her manor that is filled with all manner of magic items and gold pieces and gems and etc., etc. And it's pretty much like her and her caretaker and one gentleman who comes from a different faction of information traffickers, and he becomes kind of more important later. But he always came in with folders of information to tell us where to go next, because she was paying him to gather information on a series of relics or magic items, or whatever you want to call them. Artifacts, I guess, would be better. Artifacts of power called the Rods of Calamity. And this girl wanted to collect them and lock them away in her vault, because wherever the Rods of Calamity go, wherever they pop up throughout history, bad shit goes down. And they are vaguely themed after the four horsemen of the apocalypse. You know, war, what is it? War, death, famine, and conquest, or something like that. There's several interpretations of the four horsemen, but war, famine, disease, death. War, famine, disease. Anyway, they're vaguely themed after the four horsemen, and wherever they pop up, bad things go down. And we have these long pages of history and poetry that we can look at to kind of discern where these rods were seen last, and whose lives they fucked up, etc., etc. And having put all this together in conjecture, we can kind of surmise where the Rods of Calamity are now, or at least where one has popped up recently. And this basically becomes like a go fetch kind of quest. But we get our map, and it's like, here's Dawnhaven, and here's where a bunch of goblin attacks are happening. Like, they've got better gear, they've got an unusual amount of like tools and chain and rope, and we think they're being led by someone who wields the Rod of Calamity of war. And they're like, okay. And we're sitting there like around this table. We're in this dusty old mansion because she has no servants, because she can't get anything out of the vault money-wise, only magic items. So she promises us if we will go and fetch the Rod of Calamity and bring it back, that she'll give us free picks of the magic items that are in the vault, and we each get one. And we're like, all right, that's fine. It's a relatively simple quest. Go fetch, go take out goblin. We're like, we're like level 5, so goblins are not going to be too much of a problem. Little did we know, but we get our horses and we spend the night in the tavern, and Caleb does a big concert to earn a whole bunch of money, and he gets company with the wenches, and we all hang out, and we drink and we make merry, we get to know each other, and we head off on our horses to make our way to the town of Westgate. And Westgate is like a month or 6 weeks away. It's northwest, way up through the country towards the northern border. And the Republic of Avaros is like on the southeastern end of the continent. So it's like going from Florida up towards Kentucky. So, at a regular or like horse traveling pace, this would have meant that we had gone like 700 some odd miles. But the Republic of Avaros has like 5 or 6 major towns or major cities. So there's villages here and there, but they're not like charted on the map everywhere we went. So we make our way for Westgate. And along the way, we find some ruins, and of course, we go to raid the ruins because it's like Oblivion. There's always something cool in the ruins, and we go in there and we come across basically like a trapper's hut or a hunter's hut where there's like bear pelts and animal trophies and things like that. Why is this whole place abandoned? Is it because of the war? Because the Kingdom of Avaros, or the Republic of Avaros, excuse me, is like a freshly reformed country in terms of history. They just beat back everybody. Neighbors are still glaring at neighbors, and there are towns here and there that have been laid to waste. But, if you pry open just the right treasure chest, you might find something cool. But we wander further on towards Westgate, and while we are camping on the roadside, we are accosted by a goblin war party. And there's like 6 or 8 of these goblins, and we're level 5. So, it's like, who are these fools kidding? We have Davhand, our ranger, is kind of like sitting up, standing watch, and he kind of like boots us in the ribs a couple of times. We're under attack! Goblins! So we get up, we got our arms, and the goblins come out with blowguns. Blowguns that are tipped with sleeping poison or sleeping drought. And of course, Davhand immediately eats 2 or 3 darts and fails his save and goes down. And then Caleb, the bard, I'm playing on my bardic inspirations, singing songs, doing the best I can. In fact, I wrote down like a bunch of lyrics from all different songs to just do like couplets while we were doing songs. It was like, now I'm feeling angry and there's plenty left to do. I fought your most unwelcome help and now I'm after you. To put out debuffs or to buff my party, things like that. I made a support character. Caleb was not meant for any kind of combat outside of like the hypnotic pattern spell, which you can throw up in the sky and it'll hypnotize like a vast number of enemies, and that was about the best spell that he ever got. But passing out buffs the best I can while Gyak, our monk, and Valfar, our paladin, are trying to do combat with all these different goblins. And of course Caleb eats a couple of sleepy darts as well and goes down. Does anybody come and like slap us awake or channel divine energy or anything like that? No. So it becomes like 2-on-6 while Valfar and Gyak desperately fight these goblins away. But they do win. They are still goblins after all. But they're goblins wearing like tiny little chainmail shirts. And they have, relatively well forged, tiny little goblin-sized short bows and short swords and things like that. Somebody is gearing them with stuff they can handle. These are not like the dog slicers that you usually see, or like the sharp sticks that goblins usually carry. No, they are actually well equipped for goblins, which is very unusual. So it becomes a bit of a close scrape. And thankfully, they kill a couple of them, they kill a couple more, one of them runs away, and eventually Valfar comes back to like lay on hands or channel divine energy to get Caleb and Davhand up from where they lay sleeping under this poison. And we move down the road about a half a mile and we make camp again because that was just harrowing. This fight lasted for freaking ever because we kept going down under this sleeping drought. But that did tell us some valuable information, though, is that the goblins wanted to capture people alive. And we had heard some talk of this along the road and even back in Dawnhaven before we left, that there were goblins near Westgate that were trying to capture people alive. So either they were being used as cattle or like stuff for evil goblin magic rituals or whatever it happened to be. The goblins were organizing, gearing up, and becoming much more of a threat than it used to be. So we're starting to think that maybe one of these goblins, if not their leader, has come across a Rod of Calamity, and they've learned the art of guerrilla warfare. So probably the red rod of war. So after a while, we do make it all the way to Westgate, and we settle in there for a while, and we stay at the inn. We talk with the local like ranger chapter that keeps the Crosslight Forest safe, and the Crosslight Forest spans about half of the damn country. So saying something is in the Crosslight Forest is like saying somebody's in the Midwest. It doesn't help very much. But In the northern part of the Crosslight Forest rests Westgate, which is mainly a logging town, but they have their local ranger chapter. They've got their own like fort walls thing going on, where you've got like big big tree logs that are sharpened at the top, like things like that. And we all get there, and we've got our horses and we've got our battle wounds, and we stop in on the local ranger chapter, and they tell us that, yeah, people have been going missing lately, especially along the road. So merchants, travelers, people traveling with horse and buggy. The goblins are snatching up people, mostly alive by the looks of it, by the lack of like blood and entrails. And it goes, well, Caleb kind of leans over and he's like, well, that makes sense. If they were trying to like tranquilize or dart us on the way to Westgate, that means they were trying to take us alive as well. Thankfully, Gyak and Valfar kind of saved the day on that. So after a while, we're like, okay, well, Davhand, who's our ranger, Davhand, can you like track these goblins? He goes, yeah, absolutely. I've been in the Crosslight Forest many a time, and there are certain areas that I know and certain areas that I know really, really well, especially areas by Dawnhaven and Westgate, because both of those are kind of like nestled up against the woods. So, Davhand leads us around for a while, and he finds a lot of goblin tracks, most of which are going in a particular direction, and we're like, alright, so we're basically going into a goblin nest or a goblin cave system or something like that. We should go prepared. So we've got our potions and we've got our weapons, and we're all ready to go in there. We're feeling pretty confident because, if we're running to like a cave or a tunnel system, bottlenecking is always your friend, because goblins can travel in gigantic groups or even in tribes where there's just dozens and dozens of them. But if the cave tunnel is only 2 squares wide, well, we've got, Gyak the monk and Valfar the paladin to be our front line of defense, while Caleb does all the buffing and Davhand like shoots over their shoulders. And of course, eventually we do find a cave entrance with a twisted goblin totem atop it, and like skulls hanging from chains and different things like that. And we of course see a pair of guard towers that are just cobbled together with random like scraps of the wagons that they've destroyed, of the chariots that they've raided. There's like boxes leaning at weird angles and stuff like that, with little platforms at the top, with 1 goblin each armed with a tiny little goblin-sized crossbow, each of which has like a big like symbol with a hammer or a bell or something like that they can turn and like ring and sound the alarm. So we're waiting in the tree line, seeing if they have like a shift change, or if they're hanging out there all day. But we wait for a while, and we kind of like synchronize our attacks. So Gyak, who we all had a free magic item, Gyak's got this magic like thunder spear that he throws it, and it acts like a bolt of lightning. It just instantly travels to its target, and anything in between gets struck with lightning damage, and basically blows this goblin apart. While Valfar and Davhand like shoot up at the other goblin, they throw throwing axes. Thankfully, despite how well equipped they are, these goblins still only have like less than 10 health points, so he goes down pretty hard too. And no alarm is raised. And we hang out for a little while, like back in the tree line, to see if anybody heard us. If anybody comes rushing out, we can pick them off. But nobody heard us. Nothing happened there. And we're like, okay, Goblin Cave, everybody form up, pass out the buffs, Bard, pass out the healing, and, anything that we can do to be extra ready. And, Bardic Inspiration adds like a D6 or was it a D4? It adds more to your dice roll. If you burn a Bardic Inspiration on someone else. Is like you can power your Bardic magic songs, or you can Bardic inspire somebody. Like you're singing a song to get them all revved up and stuff like that. So, Caleb, I think, mostly favors Davhand, as a somebody who needs the bardic inspiration, because Valfor hits like a truck. He's a paladin, and Gak is very difficult to hit because he's basically a dexterity tank. He's a monk. He can't. He dodges and flips and does kicks, and he's got his throwing, lightning bolt spear of Zeus or whatever it was called. So Davhand, I think, specialized in like magic arrows, or he had like a magic cape or something like that. Not like an active weapon or anything, but Caleb spent most of the time like buffing Davhand to make sure he could hit things and to hit things hard. So with Caleb bringing up the rear and making sure they don't pass like any hidden passages or something that they might get flanked, we travel into the goblins' cavern home. The first thing we run across is a forge that has like 5 or 6 goblins like banging away at metal over anvils with like scraps of metal in like a mining cart to one side. In this place, they've fired up the forge to 3 zillion degrees, and they've got like a cast to make different weapons and things. It's like, goblins don't normally like forge things, do they? It's like, this could be the influence of the Rod of Calamity making them smarter or something like that, because what better way to prep an army or a war band or whatever than to give them excellent gear. And as far as goblin standards go, pouring out new weapons and making goblin-sized armor, they were going to be like super-powered fucking Conan goblins by the time they were done gearing up. So, of course, we rush the place, and some of the goblins run, and Davhand shoots them in the back, and Valfor, like, clocks one of them with his shield and sends it flying into the wall. They didn't see us coming, so we got the drop on them pretty hard. And we take them out before they alert more of them, and we go on through this cavernous system, and eventually we find a lot of missing people. Like 30 plus prisoners held captive in this like area with cages that are held in with vines and ropes and stuff like that, where they're barely fed. They're kept in darkness, and of course we've got a paladin with a shield that's lit up like a torch. So they're like, "Oh, the light! Are you here to save us? The goblins have been keeping us here forever." And the one goblin that got away rushes towards the cage that is filled with children and grabs this kid who's like 9 or 10 and like holds up his goblin dog slicer or his like serrated dagger or whatever, like holding this kid hostage, like, if you don't let me go, this kid's gonna die. So Caleb steps forward and he's like, "Don't worry guys, I got this. Dear goblin friend, please hear my song. If you kill that little boy, why that would just be silly." And I hear Valfor go, "Oh." But the goblin is charmed by Caleb's bardic music, and he lets the boy go. And Gak just runs up and like punches him in the back of the head, because of course he does. But yeah, Caleb saves the day with that little boy. And they free the other prisoners, and we get them to like a supply room where they can hole up until we're done like cleaning out the cave in general. Because if these goblins get away, they've still got this forge here. They've got all these supplies and food and crates and all kinds of stuff. There's like wagon wheels and parts laying in the corner. And we kind of like put thumb and forefinger together, like, we've got some extra bows and arrows, there's some extra weapons laying around. So we arm these people and we say, okay, stay here. They're weak from hunger, from not seeing the sun for days, etc., etc. We're passing out food like crazy. Stay here and shoot anything that's green that comes around the corner. Well, and we look over at Gak and Valfor and we're like, shoot anything that's short and green. Shoot anything that's short and green that comes around the corner, and you'll stay safe until we get back, and we will escort you all the way back to Westgate. And they agree to this because, you don't want to get civilians caught up in the crossfire between super fucking Conan goblins and a group of level 5 adventurers. The spells and arrows that fly will be more than enough to take somebody's head off. So they hole up in this supply room. and we continue down the tunnels into the darkness deep. And eventually we come upon a great room that is fucking filled with goblins. Like 15, 18, 20 of them. It was a vast number. And at the very front, of course, is a pit that is filled with ashes. And there is a goblin shaman to one side who's got this woman tied up in rope, like on her knees, like with a gag in her mouth. He's like shaking a stick over here. And, saying whatever in Goblinese. And there's a chieftain who's sitting up over the pit, far to the back of the room on a throne of bones and blood, who's got this rod in his hand. They're like, there it is, that's the Rod of Calamity. And of course, they immediately notice us, and they kick this lady in the back of the freaking head, and she falls into the pit. And the Goblin Chieftain stands up, and he's using the Rod of Calamity of War. He casts a fireball into the pit, and this lady just explodes. She burns into ash. And we're like, oh my god, that pit is already full of ash. How many people have they been sacrificing in these horrible rituals? And so we're like, chunky salsa fight! Ah! And we roll initiative and jump in. So we got a bunch of little goblins, and the goblin shaman, who is no doubt like their spellcaster or their healer or whatever. And we've got the goblin chieftain wielding the Rod of Calamity, or one of them, rather. And here begins one of the cruxes of the campaign, one of the problems that we had that kind of makes it a little bit funny, is that we were using Roll20 to represent like the battlefield, so we knew where everybody was in relation to everybody else. And the tokens that we used for the goblins were all different ones, so you could kind of tell them apart. But some of the tokens were dead goblins. It was like a goblin body laying on the ground with blood around it. I misconstrued the idea that there were dead goblins in the room, like they were like having like a sacrificial ritual to absorb each other's strength or something like that, and this lady that they kicked in the pit was like the catalyst. No, even the tokens that looked like dead goblins were live goblins. So I charged in past what I thought were all these bodies, strumming my bardic inspiration to Davhand, and Davhand hangs out in the doorway, but Gyak and Valfar come with me, because you gotta flank and protect your healer so they don't get grabbed up in the middle of the crossfire. So I've got a paladin on one side of me, and I've got a monk on the other side of me. I'm passing out the buffs. I'm doing the bardic inspirations. They're fighting goblins back and forth. There's green body parts flying in all directions. And then they leave me behind because the goblin shaman is like casting low-level lightning bolts. Like he's got like a spell list. He's not just like one spell and then he's done because, he's a goblin. No, he had a full complement of spells. So Gyak and Valfar make a beeline for the shaman and for the chieftain. And they left me in the middle of this big group of goblins who immediately turn around, and Caleb's like, oh shit, and he throws his loot on his back and he pulls his rapier, and Caleb is not a combat character, so he's like, ha ha, and like stabs one goblin but not enough damage to kill it, and Caleb is immediately and irrevocably Julius Caesared. Like, I'm not even kidding. It was like my token and all the goblins on all 8 squares around me were filled with goblins, and they're like, ah! Stab, 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 stab. It was like the first episode of fucking Goblin Slayer, where they grab the guy and hold him down and just stab him until he's way past dead. It was like that. So Caleb immediately gets Julius Caesared and is dead. Or not dead, but like unconscious and bleeding everywhere. And thankfully my DM had the mercy to, once Caleb was down, they turned and ran for the other combatants. Like they fanned out to chase Davhand, who just had a bow and arrow, and to chase Gyak and to protect the chieftain. So they bannered out in different directions once they were sure Caleb was down. And thankfully, again, the item that I chose for my free magic item upon character creation was the amulet of health. So instead of like slowly bleeding out, the amulet stabilized me, and I didn't like immediately die in 3 turns. But I did get to sit there for the rest of that combat with my thumb up my ass while you don't leave the healer, you don't leave the clothy or whatever you want to call that in the middle of a group of enemies. And I was so salty. And Caleb, had every reason in character to fucking hate Gyak and to fucking hate Valfer for the rest of the campaign, because there were no apologies, there were no, sorry you got, stabbed like 47 times and left to die in the middle of that goblin fight, because though we be level 5, Caleb had an armor class of like 13, so even if you're halfway trying, he's gonna take damage either way, which is why he stands in the back with, the paladin and the monk between him and everything else. But if you shoot off in different directions, shit's gonna go down, bad things are gonna happen. So Caleb got Julius Caesared, and they did, again, they were many, but they were still goblins. So eventually, after this long and drawn out combat with sheer number of things moving around, they managed to take out the shaman and all the soldier goblins and the goblin chieftain, and the Rod of Calamity kind of clatters to the ground. And of course Valfer, being our paladin, rushes over to Caleb. Is he dead? No, this glittering amulet seems to be preserving his life. Lay on hands! And he dumps like, 20 or 30 HP into my bleeding ass. And Caleb kind of sits up like, oh, why did you leave me here, you assholes? And it's like, Caleb is beyond salty. He is so pissed that his would-be friends, his adventuring party, in the first like major battle that they were a part of, decides to fucking leave him in the middle of this crowd of goblins. And like I said, the action economy is a thing. For every 2 of Caleb's actions, they got 16 actions, and that was more than enough stabs to take him down. So Caleb is pissed, and he stomps over there, and he's like, this is what we fucking came for, let's go. And he grabs the Rod of Calamity, and he lifts it up, and immediately the DM's like, you grab it with your bare hands? I was like, yeah. And he goes, oh. And I know something bad has happened, because apparently, we didn't know this beforehand, apparently the Rods of Calamity have a will of their own. The reason they're called the Rods of Calamity is because they will drive whomever wields them to cause calamity, to cause war, famine, starvation, conquest, etc., etc. It will violently change their personality to suit their own ends. Now it basically is like, hey, you're the best, Caleb. You deserve to have this rod. Nobody else should touch it. This is your reward for taking the brunt of all those goblins while your party foolishly charged out for their own glory. Those assholes. And I'm like, yeah, you're right. I'm going to hang on to this rod until we get back to Westgate, or until we get back to Dawnhaven. And Gyak, who is not very good at keeping his player knowledge separate from his character knowledge, because there was no, like, big glow of light. Caleb is not, like, glowing red with all the forces and magic of hell. He just picked it up, and he was like, this is going to be mine until we get back to Dawnhaven. But the DM says, X, Y, and Z happened to him, so Gyak is like hell you are, and, like, spin kicks Caleb down into the pit of ashes. And I was like, and ash goes everywhere. And of course, I dropped the Rod of Calamity because I fell into a pit. And they're like, okay, we're going to pick it up with like a burlap sack or like gloves or something like that, and put it in a sack and like roll it into a bedroll and like tie it up and stuff like that so nobody touches it. Caleb is laying square on his back in like this pile of ash that used to be people. So it's really fucking nasty. And they're like, okay, I'm going to throw a rope down and Valfer's going to get him out of that pit. And the whole time Caleb is so fucking salty because as soon as he lets go of the rod, the influence is gone. But having grabbed the rod, Caleb knows what it's capable of. So it will wrest control from you. And atop that, it comes with spells and abilities. So the Rod of Calamity, the red one, the Rod of War, gave him the ability to cast like Fireball, Flaming Hands, Orb of Fire, a bunch of different like fire-oriented spells to let slip the dogs of war and burn all ye fields before him. But the fireballs were all used up because the goblins were using it for their rituals. So it was like near the end of the day, they had burned all the fireball spells out of the rod for the day. But yeah, they had to fish Caleb out of the people ash and tie up the rod and make their way out of the cave. Grab all the refugees. And like, okay, we got to get out of this place. It's it's dusk or it's the middle of the night. We're gonna rest outside so that we've got starlight and moonlight because these people have been in absolute darkness for God knows how long, other than the goblins coming and grabbing a sacrifice now and then. We take everybody outside, and of course, during the stabbing incident where Caleb got Julius Caesared, his loot was destroyed because he tried to use it as a shield while he was getting stabbed from all directions. So everybody is weary. Caleb is mentally scarred from almost dying and being stabbed 47 times, only to be resurrected by a strange paladin who wields nature powers, who isn't a druid. And I'm looking at my spell list or my bardic abilities because Caleb can't hurt things very badly, but he can help people. And I was like, we've got 30 or 40 refugees. It was like, nobody's gonna sleep tonight. They're too excited from being fed, from being freed, from seeing their captors get the shit kicked out of them. Westgate is a day or two's travel, but they can't travel in the middle of the night because there's wolves and other magical creatures out in the Crosslight Forest. So Caleb uses an ability from the bardic class called the Song of Rest. Now the Song of Rest, I think, just gives you a couple more hit dice. When you lay down to sleep and regain HP, gives you a couple more hit dice to recover. But Caleb basically lullabies 40 people all at the same time. I see the moon and the moon sees me, shining through the branches of the old oak tree. And if that moon should shine on me, let it shine on the one I love. And it helps lull a bunch of people down to relax, to sleep. He doesn't have his lute. I think his hand or his arm got crushed or broken or something like that. Valfer's been trying to use his channel divinity, but he runs out, just bringing him back and stuff like that. They're healing other people. So Caleb's hand doesn't work. His lute is destroyed, but bards can just use their voices if they want to for the Song of Rest. So it's really fucking sad that he's just standing there with a broken hand and no instrument, singing a lullaby for 40 people that are fucking miserable. And even Davhand is like, this is so fucking sad. Just look at him. He's like a kicked puppy. But in due course, we do make our way back to Westgate, and the refugees are freed from the captivity of the goblins. And the Rod of Calamity has been recovered. Well, one of them has been, anyway. And we decide, we need to journey all the way back to Dawnhaven, but we're going to spend a few days to rest and recover and to fix Caleb's hand and buy a new lute and get new horses and stuff like that. Because, again, if it takes 4 to 6 weeks to travel across the entire country, that's 700 plus miles all the way down to the southeastern coast. So we make some good prep time, we buy some more food, and we make our way all the way back to Dawnhaven. where we put the Rod of Calamity of War into the vault, and we all get like a new magic item out of the vault from our tiny benefactor. And Caleb gets a war mandolin +1. It is a mandolin that within the body, within like the box where the strings lay over, is 3 hidden daggers. So it was a very cool upgrade, and it had a +1 to it, so that added to like the spell saves and the charm person stuff and everything like that. So it was a definitive upgrade for Caleb, but the seeds of chaos have already been sown, because Caleb is not happy with Valfer and Gyak for abandoning him in the middle of that battle. So he kind of cozies up to Davhand for a while, and, you know, like, fuck those guys. Let's go out to the tavern, Davhand. Come on, we'll get some bar wenches. And they go out for the evening and just kind of, like, mellow out, find some bar wenches, drink, eat really good food that's not trail rations, etc., to kind of let things cool over for a while. And that is where we stopped for that particular session. So I guess we'll stop there for today. So I hope you enjoyed that story. We have 3 more Rods of Calamity to find. So I hope you will join me next time on D&D Stories. Keep gaming.
Hi guys, T here. Remember to hit that like button for me on your way out. If you'd like to see artwork and maps from my gaming table, check out the D&D Stories Facebook page. Also, I have a Patreon if you'd like to toss a few gold pieces into your humble bard's hat. Links in the description below. Keep gaming!